Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. There are currently several investigations underway in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and his behavior and his alleged crimes. In the Virgin Islands, Denise George has been shaking a lot of trees and kicking in a lot of doors. And she has just gained a little bit more access to information in the case. Now, we know that Denise George has asked Judge Preska to release some of the documentation in the case in regards to her own investigation in the Virgin Islands. Well, now, the Miami Herald is reporting that Judge Preska has given the nod of approval, and she is going to help out Denise George as Denise George pursues a RICO case. Now, this is the civil version of a RICO case as of now, but it is a racketeering case nonetheless, and a step in the right direction is a step in the right direction. I've been talking about RICO in this case since the very first time I read one article on it. The first time I read an article and started, understanding what was going on here, that this was actually a whole network of people that were engaging in this, and it wasn't just one sick pervert running around abusing girls, I knew right away that the government had a RICO case here. And the question became, why in the hell had they not pursued RICO? And well, when you kick in that door, after having it just ajar for a moment and taking a little peek inside, once you kick it in and you step into the room, there is no going back. And 820 plus episodes later, we find ourselves here. So let's jump into this article from the Miami Herald and let's see just exactly what's going on in regards to Denise George and her pursuit of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. Headline: in latest Jeffrey Epstein legal fight, bid to sue estate for racketeering gains ground. This article was authored by Kevin G. Hall and Ben Wider. A federal judge on Wednesday handed a partial victory to the Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands, who is pursuing a civil racketeering complaint against the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, partially granting her access to an ongoing civil lawsuit that involves the disgraced financier, pedophile, and close associates. So, just alone seeing the word racketeering on in the article here in regards to Epstein is reassuring, right? It needs to be a criminal racketeering case, but at this point, just seeing the word racketeering here and seeing the tires being kicked by Denise George is certainly a big step in the right direction, because it is obvious that this was an ongoing criminal enterprise. There were people in leadership roles, and then there were lieutenants who had people underneath them even. So all of those people, the core 4 plus 2 more especially, must be held accountable for their role within the organization. And I've said it a million times. Anything after that, after the core 4 and 2 more, is gravy in this case. But the way they're going to get those folks is via RICO. They're not going to be able to get anybody who is involved with Jeffrey Epstein financially if they don't drop RICO charges on these fools. Zero chance it'll happen. The only way these enablers ever get put into jail, ever face any sort of justice, is if they face RICO charges. Because once those charges are put on the table, then it's very difficult for people to wiggle out of that net. And with the sentencing being so draconian, a lot of people want to get into bed with the government at that point and start ratting on their friends. So it's very important that RICO is used in this case. And like I've said, once we see one more of these sealed indictments become unsealed and somebody else gets arrested here, I don't think it'll be long before we see a superseded indictment that includes racketeering. Attorney General Denise George brought a civil enforcement action against the Epstein estate in January, calling it an ongoing criminal enterprise. She went on to identify the two executors of the estate, Epstein lawyer Darren K. Indyke and accountant Richard Kahn, as alleged co-conspirators. That alone right there is eye-opening, right? The Attorney General of the Virgin Islands is calling Kahn and Indyke co-conspirators in this case. And yet these two bumblenuts are the executors of the estate. They're calling the shots. They're going to make payouts. They're going to let people like Sarah Kellen Vickers slide in and try and apply for funding through the compensation fund. They're going to re-victimize these survivors all over again. That's the game we're going to play. These two clowns should not be worrying about the estate. They should be worrying about their stay with the state, because these two dudes were very much integral parts of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise and the whole entire operations running smoothly. Epstein, who had homes in Palm Beach, Manhattan, Paris, and New Mexico, also maintained an estate in the U.S. Virgin Islands situated on his private island. He owned a second island nearby. George asked U.S. District Judge Judge Preska on September 1st to grant the U.S. territory intervenor status, allowing for confidential access to materials filed under seal with the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. And this is something we talked about when George originally made the ask. And I said that I had no doubt in my mind that Preska would give her the go-ahead and work with Denise George as far as information goes here and giving her access to some of the case files if needed. Now, we see that all coming to fruition, and it just once again goes to show you that Judge Preska is not playing games with these people. She's not going to be intimidated by these people, and she's not going to let them get away with their nonsense. Her working with Denise George is certainly a huge, huge step in the proper direction, and it's certainly something that is a very good sign, in my opinion, when they're sharing information like this. Preska is presiding over a now settled civil lawsuit between accused Epstein co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag and bipedal serpent, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein survivor Virginia Roberts. Although the case was settled in 2017, the Miami Herald sued for access to depositions and other records from that lawsuit, and Preska in July ruled that there was a presumption of public access to these documents. And Preska has been very firm and very consistent with her opinion about this. This stuff should be in the public record, and there's no sort of technicality, it would seem, that's going to keep that from occurring. The fact that she's willing to share sealed documents with Denise George is also very telling about how Preska feels about this case and which way that she thinks it's going to go. Some documents came out quickly, and others, such as lengthy depositions by Maxwell, have been the subject of wrangling since summertime. On Wednesday, Preska handed Attorney General George a partial win. And even just that is a good thing, right? The more transparency here and the more they work together, the better, because it's all about the same goal. And that goal is to bring these people to justice for what they were involved with. Although she didn't give the Attorney General complete access to the case files, Preska granted parts of the September request from George. She ruled that no later than December 10th, Roberts' attorneys must provide to the U.S. Virgin Islands under seal a copy of Epstein's deposition in the Roberts-Maxwell lawsuit, which began in 2015, and all exhibits that are attached to it. Attorneys must also provide to George a list of everyone who sat for depositions in the dispute. So that's going to give her another look inside of the room, right? Denise George, I mean. All of these other documents it's going to provide a lot of context, and the fact that it's going to be a list of everyone who sat for depositions in the dispute is also a big deal, considering she has her own subpoenas out there, considering people like Glenn Dubin and Leon Black are in her crosshairs. I think this is pretty important stuff for Denise George and her investigation moving forward. The United States Virgin Islands may use these materials solely in connection with the United States Virgin Islands pending Virgin Islands Criminally Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act enforcement action against Epstein, against the estate of Jeffrey E. Epstein and several Epstein-controlled entities. Wow. So in Preska's ruling, she calls it a Corrupt Organization Act enforcement. It's a RICO. She's calling it a RICO case, but just again, the civil version of it. I can't wait for there to be a court document that comes out with an R instead of the C. Instead of it being a SICO case, I want it to be RICO. Read the Wednesday order from Preska, which also warned that government lawyers there shall be subject to sanctions for any unauthorized public disclosure of the identities of Epstein survivors. So she's putting Denise George on notice and the lawyers on blast and on notice that if there's any sort of leaks here, that there's going to be sanctions. And that Preska is not going to take too kindly to any names of the survivors being released to the public due to this access that has been granted. Underscoring the complexity of several overlapping legal battles, not the least of which is Maxwell's federal criminal case, Preska told the Virgin Islands legal team it would receive a copy of a prior order put in the docket under seal away, explaining why certain information was ordered disclosed to celebrity attorney Alan Dershowitz. He is embroiled in a pair of competing defamation suits brought by him and against him involving Roberts, who claims she was forced by Epstein to have sex with Dershowitz and other powerful men. And now, remember when that was all going down, that Preska gave Dershowitz access to some of this information. And that information that she gave him access to was nothing that he was able to use, it would seem, right? So who knows what the hell sort of information that was that he was able to get. And we know that Dershowitz is a snake in the grass, right? So I'm sure that whatever was released to him had to do with him and wasn't anything sensitive as far as names. She told him in the ruling plainly that she wasn't giving him any sort of access to that kind of stuff. Dershowitz denies this and has aggressively pushed to release all information that pertains to him in order to clear his name. The problem for Preska is that some of the information is tied up with non-parties who are numbered in court documents and referred to as John Doe 1, John Doe 2, and so on. These does don't want their names disclosed. So, again, that's another important thing to note, especially considering that a lot of these guys might have given these depositions, right? And Preska is giving George access to that stuff. And she's also giving her access to the people who sat for these depositions. So I would think that even these people who don't want their names disclosed, and I think that's ridiculous at this point, I think that all of their names should be disclosed. If you were involved with Epstein and you were brought up in any capacity, well, You should be able to make your case to the judge, and then the judge should be able to rule and render a decision as to if your name should be released or redacted. And I think that if it was left up to Preska, a lot of these names would just be released. Preska's order sought to make clear there was a certain non-party Doe with particularly weighty privacy interests that needed to be protected. So it's probably Dershowitz, right? That would be my guess. Since he's embroiled in all of these legal challenges at this point. And we know he is a double-talking MFer. He says, I want all of this released, but in the courtroom, we know that's not the case. We know that he's maneuvering, we know that he's angling, and we know that he's looking for a way to try and gain a foothold and control the narrative. But I don't believe Dershowitz one single bit at all, and I highly doubt that he wants this stuff released, right? Highly doubt it. Dershowitz helped engineer a deal in 2008 for Epstein that avoided tough federal charges in favor of lighter treatment by state prosecutors in Florida. The Miami Herald's Perversion of Justice series in November 2018 spotlighted the deal and brought renewed attention on Epstein. He was arrested in July 2019 on federal sex crime charges and was found dead in his jail cell the following month in an apparent suicide. I like how they throw in an apparent suicide there. Well done. Because guess what? We don't know. A lot of these newspapers run around and talk about, he died of a suicide. The medical examiner told us. Meanwhile, out of the other side of their mouth, they're telling us how you can't trust Bill Barr or anything that he does. While I agree with that, why be hypocritical? I don't trust any of them MFers, all right? Bill Barr, the county examiner, the local dog catcher at this point. I don't trust any of them. His longtime associate, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag, Maxwell was arrested in July of 2020, charged with 4 counts of sexual trafficking of a minor and 2 counts of perjury. She was considered a flight risk, denied bail, and held in a New York detention center awaiting trial next summer. Now, she deserves to be there. I don't want to hear shit about her leaving that jail. And like I talked about previously with the whole COVID angle and the fact that she is in quarantine, I don't want them using that as some sort of leverage. But we know her lawyers are going to do that. We talked about that yesterday morning, and it's obvious what they're up to. Maxwell's lawyers had argued that she should be granted bail because of the risk of COVID-19. And this week, federal prosecutors acknowledged that Maxwell is currently in quarantine because she was exposed to someone who tested positive. Well, if it's running so rampant like everybody says, and it's running rampant everywhere, wouldn't she have even more of a chance of coming in contact with somebody who's positive if she was free and in the streets and not in a controlled environment? It's not like she's in general population. One of the people that work there, had COVID, and that's how she was exposed. But if she was out in the public, if it's so rampant and the positivity rates are so high like they're saying, wouldn't it be even more of a chance of her contracting it if she was out in the public noodling around? Maxwell has, so far, tested negative, but her lawyers continued their long-running dispute with the government about the terms of Maxwell's detention, saying that she is constantly monitored by a camera even when she leaves her cell, and woken every 15 minutes at night to ensure that she is still breathing, presumably in response to Epstein's death in custody. Well, yeah. What are they supposed to do? Let her die too? Let her commit suicide or someone kill her or whatever the hell may have you? Slip in the shower, fall and break her head accidentally? They can't have it. It'll be it would be bedlam for them. People would literally show up with pitchforks and torches at the Department of Justice and demand action. I truly believe we're at that point. I truly believe people are at the point where if this goes sideways, that there is going to be such blowback, such major blowback against the authorities that they're not going to know what hit them. And I'll be right there with you folks, shoulder to shoulder, because it's obscene that they'd even try and use this as an excuse. Her lawyers asked that the judge summon Warden Heriberto Tellez from Maxwell's facility, the Metropolitan Detention Center, to address Maxwell's conditions. So the warden gets called down on the carpet all of a sudden because Maxwell's being treated unfairly? What about all of the other prisoners that are being treated unfairly throughout the nation? What about all of the other prisoners that don't have 13 hours access to their discovery or to their lawyers? You know how many of those prisoners would kill, literally, to get the solitude that Ghislaine Maxwell has in jail? They're all packed like sardines together in these jail cells, smelling each other, go to the bathroom, sweating on each other, you name it. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell is lounged out by herself. Oh, she's lonely, she's bored. Here's an idea. Read a book. Maxwell has fought Preska's order to release documents from the civil case, claiming they will harm her ability to defend herself in the federal case. Appellate judges have sided with Preska on the presumption of public access to the documents. Yeah, look, the appellate court was very clear with their ruling. They stuck with the precedent that they had set previously with Epstein, and there was no doubt that the second was going to keep precedent, right? It's very, very, very unlikely that judges break the precedent that they had already set in their courtroom without some earth-shattering information to steer them in that direction. In a rare look back at the 2007-2008 federal investigation into Epstein, the Justice Department earlier this month concluded that there was no corrupt intent to treat Epstein lightly, but that the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta, exercised poor judgment in reaching a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein that also spared many of his close associates legal action at the time. Bad judgment? Bad judgment. That's what they're calling this, huh? There are a lot of things that could be labeled as bad judgment. This is a little bit different. This is negligent, okay? The fact that they used the wording bad judgment in the internal report is all you need to know about the validity of said internal report. Absolute garbage. It should be used for nothing more than starting a fire in your fireplace over this holiday season, because that is exactly what it's worth. Ungats, nothing, zilcho. That report was a supreme attempt at CYA. Cover your ass. What'd you think? They were going to throw people under the bus in that report? Zero chance of happening. Have you taken a look at the Inspector General, Mr. Horowitz, and his crew of miscreants? You really expected these people to come in and clean up the mess? That's not their job. It's just like a human resources department at a corporation. Their job isn't to make your life better. Their job is to protect the company. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And as for all of you out there, I hope that you all are enjoying your Thanksgiving. And I hope that, even though it's a weird-ass time period and things are not normal, I hope that everybody makes the best of their day today and tries to give thanks for the good things that they have in their lives. Because guess what? All the other crap, all the other shit will still be there tomorrow, folks. So take the day, pat yourself on the back, and give thanks. Personally, I'm very thankful for all of you out there in the audience who listen to the podcast on a daily basis, who follow the show all the time, who support the show. You folks are just amazing, and I am 100% thankful for each and every one of you out there. So until later on, folks, I hope you all consume a ton of turkey. I hope you all have your stretchy pants on hand. And I hope that you have a fantastic day.